The Sleeping Ward Mystery. In the heart of Toronto, Canada, once stood a psychiatric hospital known as St. Peter's Mental Institute. To the public, it was a place of treatment and recovery. But behind its tall fences and locked wards, something else unfolded. A mystery that would outlive the building itself. In February 2010, a patient identified only as Mr. D vanished without a trace from the hospital's secure Ward C. His bed was found empty, his monitoring equipment still active, and every door locked from the inside. There are no signs of struggle, no broken locks, and no witnesses. What began as a routine night inside a mental health facility soon became one of the most baffling disappearances in Canadian medical history. The case exposed a trail of secrecy, questionable experiments, and missing evidence that continues to raise questions more than a decade later. This is the story of the man who disappeared from the sleeping ward, and the truth that might have been buried with him. The night that vanished. Toronto, Canada, winter of 2010. St. Peter's Mental Institute, a facility long known for housing patients with severe psychiatric disorders, had stood for nearly 60 years. Its reputation was that of a place where difficult cases were treated with care and precision. It was a cold, quiet night in February, the kind of night when snow covered the streets and streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalks. Inside the institute, the halls were still. Staff and patients alike were expected to rest, yet few could imagine the events that were about to unfold. On February 16th, a patient known only as Mr. D, a 36-year-old male with no immediate family in Canada, vanished without a trace from Ward C, the Institute's most secure sleeping ward. The ward was designed to hold patients considered at risk of harming themselves or others. Each room was locked electronically, windows were reinforced, and the hallways were monitored by cameras. Motion sensors lined the corridors. In a facility like this, a disappearance should have been impossible. Mr. D had been admitted 6 months earlier. His records described him as calm, intelligent, and cooperative with medical staff. He was enrolled in a treatment program known as Somni-9, an experimental sleep research project that monitored neural activity during extended sleep cycles. Staff noted that he often asked questions about the procedures, demonstrating a curiosity that set him apart from other patients. On the night of February 16th, Mr. D took his evening medication around 9:15 p.m. and returned to his room. Staff reported that he seemed relaxed, chatting briefly with the night nurse. His routine was consistent with every other night, and there were no indications of distress or unusual behavior. By 2 a.m., he was last seen on surveillance footage walking calmly down the corridor near his room. Within the next 2 hours, he was gone. The room he occupied was found intact the following morning. His bed was neatly made, his shoes and personal belongings were in place, and his medication had not been disturbed. The only anomaly was a window, slightly open, which should have been impossible for anyone inside the room to open. There were no signs of struggle, no broken locks, no footprints in the snow outside, and no evidence of forced entry. Staff initially thought he had wandered elsewhere in the hospital. A thorough search of the ward and surrounding areas revealed nothing. By 6:45 a.m., when a morning nurse arrived to check on patients, it was clear Mr. D had disappeared entirely. Police were called, and the hospital went into lockdown. Surveillance footage was reviewed repeatedly. The last confirmed image of Mr. D showed him walking toward his room, nodding to a staff member, and then vanishing from the camera's view. Technicians later discovered that a portion of the recording had been overwritten manually during the window of his disappearance. This detail raised immediate concerns and suggested the possibility of human interference. Investigators examined every security measure. Ward C's doors were electronically locked, alarms functioned correctly, and motion detectors showed no unusual activity after the last sighting. The open window, small and reinforced, presented no feasible escape route. Investigators, staff, and police were baffled. The disappearance of Mr. D was not only a violation of safety protocols, but an event that challenged the understanding of human behavior and the reliability of security measures. For months, the case remained unsolved, and Ward C acquired a reputation among staff and locals as a place of mystery and unease. This marked the beginning of a case that would become one of Canada's most perplexing and controversial institutional mysteries. Mr. D's disappearance raised questions not only about hospital safety and accountability, but also about the nature of experimental procedures conducted on patients and the limits of human understanding. The investigation begins. After the disappearance of Mr. D, the staff at St. Peter's Mental Institute were thrown into chaos. By mid-morning, the hospital had contacted the Toronto Police Service. Officers arrived quickly, led by Detective Sergeant Elaine Fraser, a veteran investigator with decades of experience in missing persons cases. The scene inside Ward C was unsettling. An empty room, a neatly made bed, and no evidence of forced entry. Police immediately began retracing Mr. D's last movements. Surveillance footage showed him walking down the corridor at approximately 1:47 a.m., wearing a standard hospital gown, nodding to a staff member, and returning to his room. Then, the footage flickered briefly, and when it resumed, Mr. D was gone. Technicians later confirmed that the recording had been manually overwritten, a detail that no staff could explain. Detectives interviewed the night staff, including nurses, orderlies, and security personnel. All insisted they had performed their duties as usual. One security guard, Franklin Hayes, admitted he had briefly left his post around 2:05 a.m. to attend to another patient. When asked who monitored the cameras in his absence, he could not provide a clear answer. The supervisor on duty denied intervening. These inconsistencies heightened suspicion, but no one admitted to wrongdoing. The investigation quickly expanded beyond the institute. Police searched the surrounding grounds, checking every hallway, courtyard, and utility tunnel. Tracking dogs were brought in, but lost Mr. D's scent within feet of the ward door. Outside, snow covered any possible footprints. Doors, windows, and fences were checked, yet there was no sign of a struggle or exit. Attention turned to the open window in Mr. D's room. Maintenance logs indicated that the window had been sealed 2 years prior. It was small and reinforced, only opening about 18 inches from the inside, making it highly unlikely that a man could have escaped through it. There were no fingerprints on the frame, and the snow beneath remained undisturbed. Investigators were left with a baffling question. If he did not exit through conventional means, how had he vanished? At the same time, detectives explored Mr. D's background. He had no immediate family in Canada, no known friends nearby, and very few personal belongings. Records from the Somni 9 program revealed that he had been part of a controversial experimental treatment that monitored patients' neural activity during extended sleep cycles. Somni 9 was intended to help individuals with severe sleep disorders and trauma-induced hallucinations, but some patients had reported intense side effects, including temporary memory loss and vivid, sometimes terrifying hallucinations. Investigators attempted to access full Somni 9 research files, but the hospital claimed the documents were proprietary and confidential. Requests from police were repeatedly denied, slowing the investigation and raising suspicions of a potential cover-up. Searches of the city produced no results. CCTV footage from nearby streets showed no sign of Mr. D. Local shelters, hospitals, and public transit stations were checked, but he was never found. Tips from the public led to false leads, including a reported sighting in a frozen park near Lake Ontario. When authorities arrived, the man described in the report was gone, leaving only footprints that ended abruptly at the edge of the ice. The hospital's internal atmosphere changed. Staff reported feeling uneasy, some refusing night shifts. Former patients recalled hearing unexplained noises and seeing fleeting shadows near Ward C. One nurse who worked close to Mr. D's room reported hearing footsteps at night when the hall was empty, describing the sounds as deliberate, slow, and almost human in nature. By February 2010, the story had reached media outlets across Toronto. Headlines highlighted the strange circumstances of Mr. D's disappearance, noting the locked doors, security measures, and lack of any evidence. Hospital administrators maintained that he had likely left the facility voluntarily, a statement that satisfied few. Over the following weeks, police interviewed technicians and staff involved with Somni 9. A former technician reported that Mr. D had exhibited unusual brain activity during his sessions. He described one late-night reading in which Mr. D's neural patterns spiked far beyond expected levels, suggesting a level of awareness that could not be explained by sedation or normal sleep cycles. The technician described it as if Mr. D had been awake inside the dream, though what that meant remained uncertain. Investigators explored every possible scenario: accidental disappearance, escape, abduction, medical emergency, or error in the monitoring system. None fit perfectly. Each lead generated new questions rather than answers. By the end of the first month, the investigation began to stall. The hospital's refusal to release Somni 9 records, combined with missing surveillance footage and conflicting staff statements, left the case with more questions than solutions. Public interest remained high, and journalists began pursuing their own inquiries, attempting to access information denied to the police. One staff member, speaking anonymously, claimed to have witnessed a shadow near Mr. D's room on the night he disappeared. He said the shape moved along the walls without entering or exiting through any visible door. While police could not verify the account, it added to a growing sense of unease surrounding Ward C. By mid-2010, the case had become one of Toronto's most mysterious unsolved disappearances. Despite repeated searches, inquiries, and public attention, Mr. D had vanished completely. Ward C became synonymous with the inexplicable, and the disappearance continued to puzzle investigators, staff, and journalists alike. Theories and secrets. As the investigation into Mr. D's disappearance continued, multiple theories began to emerge, each more perplexing than the last. The hospital staff, police investigators, journalists, and the public struggled to make sense of what had happened in Ward C. Theory 1. Escape. The simplest explanation seemed to be that Mr. D had escaped the institute. He was intelligent, analytical, and observant. Some suggested he had memorized staff schedules and security routines, taking advantage of a brief lapse during the night. However, the evidence contradicted this theory. Ward C was heavily secured with locked doors, motion sensors, reinforced windows, and camera surveillance. There were no signs of forced entry or tampering, no footprints outside the building, and no confirmed sightings in the surrounding city. It was as if he had vanished in a thin air. Theory 2. An inside job. Another theory proposed that someone within the hospital had assisted Mr. D or facilitated his disappearance. Investigators noted discrepancies in staff logs. Entries for the night of February 16th were written in different inks, and some pages were missing entirely. The departure of Dr. Carl Marin, the lead researcher on the Somni 9 program, just days after the disappearance, fueled speculation. He left Canada abruptly for Switzerland and declined to comment beyond saying the event was unfortunate. Anonymous accounts from former employees suggested that a small group of staff had access to security systems and could have orchestrated the disappearance. Theory 3. Experimental accident. Evidence from the Somni 9 program raised troubling questions. The program involved neural monitoring during extended sleep cycles, and Mr. D had reportedly reacted differently than other patients. Technicians observed his brain activity spike to unprecedented levels during a sleep session shortly before his disappearance. One anonymous technician described it as like he was awake inside a dream, observing everything but unable to interact with the outside. The machine's recordings ended abruptly at 2:06 a.m., the exact minute he vanished. Some hypothesized that the experiment inadvertently caused a physiological or neurological event that allowed Mr. D to disappear from physical observation. Theory 4. Paranormal explanation. Rumors soon emerged suggesting something far stranger than an escape or accident. Ward C had a long history of odd occurrences, including unexplained power fluctuations, sudden temperature drops, and patients reporting shadows or figures in the hallways. Former patients described waking from sleep unable to move, seeing figures standing at the edge of their beds, or hearing voices that whispered their names. One patient claimed to have seen a faint blue glow in Mr. Diaz's room on the night of his disappearance. Some staff admitted feeling uneasy in the ward at night, claiming they occasionally heard footsteps or doors opening when no one was present. While no physical evidence supported paranormal activity, these accounts contributed to a growing sense that Ward C was a place where ordinary explanations might not apply. Theory 5. Institutional cover-up. Another possibility was that the disappearance was deliberately concealed. Hospital administrators repeatedly denied police and media access to the Somni-9 research files. Surveillance footage from the night in question was overwritten, and some staff members reported being pressured to remain silent. Leaked documents that surfaced years later suggested connections between the institute and a private company funding the research. Employees who spoke anonymously described protocols that were extreme, secretive, and ethically questionable. Some claimed that patients were kept under prolonged sedation for research purposes, with little oversight. The combination of missing footage, confidential experimental procedures, and sudden staff departures made it plausible that the Institute wanted to keep the full story hidden. Staff accounts and witness testimonies. Several former staff members described unusual events leading up to the disappearance. Night nurses reported hearing unexplained whispers in the halls, while technicians recalled Mr. Diaz's unusual responses during the Somni-9 trials. A former orderly mentioned seeing a shadow move across the walls of Ward C, but no person was visible. A nurse reported that the temperature in Mr. Diaz's room dropped suddenly on the night he vanished, and she felt an unexplainable presence in the room. These accounts were anecdotal, yet they added weight to theories beyond a simple escape. Impact on the hospital. The disappearance had long-lasting effects on the Institute. Staff morale dropped, and many refused night shifts in Ward C. Rumors spread about the ward being cursed or dangerous. Patients themselves became more anxious, and some refused treatment or participation in experiments. The administration responded by tightening security and instituting stricter confidentiality policies. Theories about Mr. Diaz's disappearance remained unresolved. Was it an escape, an accident during experimental treatment, a deliberate cover-up, or something entirely unexplained? Each explanation had flaws, and no definitive evidence pointed conclusively to any one theory. Even years later, discussions about the case continue. The combination of experimental procedures, missing footage, unusual staff reports, and unexplained occurrences created a puzzle that remains unsolved. The story of the sleeping ward has become a symbol of mystery, raising questions about the boundaries of science, ethics, and human understanding. The search beyond the walls. Following the disappearance of Mr. D, the investigation extended beyond the walls of St. Peter's Mental Institute. Police, hospital staff, and volunteers combed every inch of the surrounding area. Toronto streets, parks, transit stations, and shelters were checked for any sign of him. Flyers with his photo were posted across the city, yet no confirmed sightings were reported. Officers focused on areas accessible to the patient, including nearby alleys and the frozen edges of Lake Ontario. In one instance, a man in a hospital gown was reportedly seen walking along the lakeshore. When authorities arrived, no one was present. Those snowprints ended abruptly at the ice, as if he had vanished. Media coverage increased, bringing national attention. Newspapers published headlines like "Patient Vanishes from Locked Ward" and "Toronto Institute Under Scrutiny." Television crews arrived at the hospital gates, demanding statements. Hospital administrators maintained a controlled message, emphasizing that they were cooperating fully with police, while insisting Mr. D had left voluntarily. Journalists began independent investigations. Some interviewed former staff and patients, while others sought information on Somni-9, the experimental program in which Mr. D had been enrolled. Attempts to access the hospital's internal records were repeatedly denied. The Institute cited confidentiality agreements and legal restrictions, further raising suspicions. Former employees, speaking anonymously, revealed that the Somni 9 program involved long sessions where patients were placed under sedation and monitored with neural caps to record brain activity during sleep. Reports indicated that Mr. D had reacted unusually, displaying extended periods of heightened neural activity that no other patient had exhibited. One technician described the readings as continuous lucid states beyond normal consciousness. Leads from the public proved inconclusive. Several people reported seeing a man matching Mr. D's description in parks, shopping areas, and transit stations. Each sighting, however, lacked verification. Police followed up diligently, but none produced tangible evidence. Inside the hospital, staff reported heightened tension. Nurses refused certain shifts, claiming they could feel the lingering presence of Mr. D near Ward C. Patients recalled hearing footsteps or whispers, even in empty hallways. Former staff spoke of small, unexplained events, doors opening without cause, sudden cold drafts, and lights flickering in rooms where no one was present. By March 2010, investigative journalist Hannah Cross began covering the case. She filed multiple requests for access to hospital records under Canada's Freedom of Information Act. Each request was denied, with the hospital citing patient privacy and research confidentiality. Frustrated, she began contacting former employees individually. Several agreed to speak off record. They described the Somni 9 program as experimental and secretive, with protocols that often pushed patients to extremes. According to them, Mr. D had consistently questioned the procedures and seemed aware of risks others did not. Some claimed that his reactions during sessions were alarming, with moments when he appeared fully conscious despite sedation. Anonymous staff described the night of the disappearance as tense. The hallways were quiet, but there was a noticeable disruption in the security monitoring system. Surveillance footage had been overwritten during the critical time, leaving investigators without crucial visual evidence. Several staff members admitted they had noticed anomalies in Ward C in the days prior. Unexplained shadows, cold spots, and brief power interruptions. Media coverage and public interest created pressure on the hospital, but little concrete information emerged. The police, hampered by missing data and restricted access to experimental files, could only confirm that the disappearance defied conventional explanation. By the end of the spring of 2010, the public search had largely ceased. Police concluded that all immediate avenues had been exhausted. However, online forums and discussion boards carried the story forward. Some theorized Mr. D had been taken by a third party. Others argued he had disappeared due to an experimental accident or something more mysterious. Despite the apparent halt in official investigation, curiosity and speculation persisted. Residents near the Institute reported continued strange occurrences. Unexplained noises at night, lights flickering in empty buildings, and fleeting shadows near the old hospital grounds. Former patients shared stories of dreams in which they encountered Mr. D, often warning them to stay awake or repeating phrases that mirrored his last known behaviors. The search beyond the walls, while inconclusive, solidified the case as one of Toronto's most enduring unsolved mysteries. Every lead raised more questions than answers. Ward C, the site of Mr. D's disappearance, became a symbol of both scientific ambition and the unknown, a place where human understanding failed to provide closure. The hidden files. Years after Mr. D's disappearance, fragments of the truth began to surface through leaked documents and insider testimonies. In late 2014, a set of files appeared online on an encrypted message board known for hosting confidential leaks. The documents were labeled Somni 9 trial data, confidential, and contained patient logs, experiment schedules, and internal emails between staff members. Though much of the content was redacted, the information painted a picture of a secretive and controversial program. The Somni 9 program was officially described as research into advanced sleep monitoring, designed to study brain activity during extended sleep cycles. In practice, however, the documents suggested the experiments went far beyond standard medical research. Patients were sedated for long periods and connected to neural monitoring caps that recorded brainwave activity in extreme detail. Some sessions lasted up to 48 hours. One internal email, dated January 28, 2010, just weeks before Mr. D's disappearance, stated, "Subject D has reached Phase 5 response. Recommend extended observation beyond safe duration." This email was signed by Dr. Carl Marin, the lead researcher who left Canada abruptly days after the disappearance. The leaked files included neural readings showing abnormal spikes in Mr. D's brain activity during a session on the night he vanished. The readings indicated extended periods of heightened awareness, far beyond what was expected under sedation. The last recorded data ended abruptly at 2:06 a.m., the exact minute he disappeared. Former employees corroborated parts of the leaks. One anonymous technician described the experiments as extreme, noting that Mr. D's neural activity became something we had never seen before. The technician claimed that Mr. D seemed conscious even during full sedation, observing everything around him but unable to respond in the normal physical sense. Other staff members spoke of strict confidentiality measures. Employees were instructed to sign binding non-disclosure agreements and were warned not to discuss Somni 9 under any circumstances. Some staff members who refused to comply were offered severance packages and asked to leave quietly. Emails within the leaked files suggested a connection between St. Peter's and a private research contractor named Neurovis Systems Limited, which appeared to fund the Somni 9 program. Documents hinted that the research might have had applications beyond medicine, though specifics were unclear. Investigators and journalists analyzing the files noted a cryptic entry in the program records. Subject D transitioned beyond measurable range. Termination classified as non-physical. Awaiting retrieval protocol. The phrasing fueled speculation that Mr. D's disappearance might have been tied directly to experimental procedures rather than a simple escape or abduction. Several former staff who spoke anonymously described strange events leading up to the disappearance. One nurse recalled unusual lights in Mr. D's room during monitoring, while a technician remembered brief periods when monitoring equipment displayed anomalous readings unrelated to any known brain function. Some suggested these anomalies were dismissed by higher-ups in the program, though no official records confirm this. Police and hospital authorities have never verified the authenticity of the leaked Somni 9 files. The hospital's successor organization denied their validity and claimed the documents were likely fabricated. Yet, digital metadata traced portions of the files back to the Institute's internal servers, lending some credibility to the leaks. Despite the controversy, the hidden files provided the only detailed glimpse into Mr. D's final hours. They suggested that his disappearance was connected to the experiments in Ward C, though the exact mechanism remained unexplained. The combination of missing surveillance footage, restricted hospital records, leaked Somni 9 documents, and eyewitness accounts created a complex puzzle. Researchers, journalists, and online communities continued to examine every detail, attempting to understand how a patient could vanish entirely from a secure facility. The hidden files deepened the mystery rather than solved it. They suggested a scenario in which Mr. D's consciousness or physical presence may have been altered during an experiment, raising questions about ethics, oversight, and the limits of human understanding. Even years later, the files are referenced by those investigating the case. They have become a central piece of the puzzle, providing both hints and new questions, and keeping the story of the sleeping ward alive in the public imagination. The closure and the shadows that remained. By 2015, St. Peter's Mental Institute had officially closed. The decades-old hospital, once a prominent psychiatric facility, was sold to a private developer. Ward C, the infamous sleeping ward, was sealed off and later demolished. Concrete foundations and overgrown grounds were all that remained of the building that had housed some of Toronto's most vulnerable patients. Even after its closure, the story of Mr. D persisted. Residents living near the former hospital grounds reported strange experiences. Lights would flicker in abandoned buildings, doors would creak open despite being locked, and cold drafts seemed to move through areas where no one was present. Security guards patrolling the site described seeing shadows that appeared human in shape but vanished when approached. Former patients and staff also shared unsettling memories. One former patient claimed to wake in the night to find a figure standing silently in the hallway, pale and barefoot, whispering phrases that mirrored Mr. D's last known words. Nurses recalled feeling a sudden presence in empty rooms, and technicians remembered brief, unexplained spikes in old Somni 9 equipment before it was dismantled. The hospital's closure did not bring closure to the case. Investigators and journalists continued to follow leads, but the trail had gone cold. Police records remained sealed, and internal Somni 9 files were inaccessible. Former staff bound by confidentiality agreements were unwilling or unable to share what they knew. Public fascination with the case continued to grow. Online forums dissected every detail of Mr. D's disappearance, from his last recorded movements to anomalies in the leaked Somni 9 files. Some argued that Mr. D had successfully escaped and was living quietly under a new identity. Others speculated that the experiments had caused a phenomenon beyond current scientific understanding, removing him from physical observation entirely. The disappearance had lasting effects on former staff. Many refused to discuss Ward C, even years later. Some left healthcare entirely, citing moral or psychological distress. Others moved quietly to other facilities, haunted by the events of February 16, 2010. The demolished grounds themselves became a symbol of mystery. Residents reported hearing unexplained footsteps, seeing fleeting shadows, and experiencing sudden temperature drops near the former ward foundations. Some claimed that old equipment, left behind during the demolition, seemed to retain residual power, causing lights to flicker without explanation. The legacy of Ward C is not limited to its physical remnants. The case of Mr. D has become a cautionary tale about the limits of medical oversight, ethical boundaries in experimental research, and the unexplained consequences that can arise in institutions designed to protect the vulnerable. Even after years of speculation and investigation, the core question remains: how does a patient disappear from a locked, monitored facility without leaving a trace? No criminal charges were ever filed, no evidence conclusively proved foul play, and no one has claimed to know Mr. D's whereabouts. Ward C, though demolished, lives on in memory, testimony, and legend. The shadows that remain are not only physical but psychological, haunting those who were present and the public who follow the story. The Sleeping Ward mystery has become one of Toronto's most enduring and enigmatic unsolved cases, a story that refuses resolution. The legacy and the enduring mystery. Years after the closure of St. Peter's Mental Institute and the demolition of Ward C, the story of Mr. D continues to captivate the public, researchers, and journalists. His disappearance has crossed from official record into legend, a symbol of the unexplained and a cautionary tale about the limits of science and institutional oversight. The legacy of the case is multifaceted. For the hospital, it serves as a reminder of the ethical and operational risks associated with experimental research. The Somni 9 program, though intended for therapeutic purposes, pushed patients' neurological limits in ways that were poorly documented and insufficiently supervised. Leaked files and anonymous staff testimony suggest that safety protocols may have been ignored or deliberately circumvented, highlighting the potential consequences when human experimentation is conducted without transparency. The disappearance also left a lasting impact on those who worked at St. Peter's. Former staff report ongoing anxiety, sleep disturbances, and a lingering sense of unease. Many refuse to discuss Ward C even years later. Former patients, too, recall vivid memories of Mr. D and the events surrounding his disappearance, often describing recurring dreams, hallucinations, or feelings of being observed. Online communities continue to examine every detail. Forums, discussion boards, and social media groups dissect leaked somni, 9 files, eyewitness accounts, and photographs of the abandoned institute. Speculation runs from the rational to the fantastical. Some argue Mr. D escaped into Toronto, possibly under an assumed identity. Others suggest the experiments caused an anomalous event, removing him from physical reality. Some even posit a paranormal or metaphysical explanation. Journalists and independent researchers continue to follow leads. Though police records remain sealed and the hospital maintains confidentiality, scattered documents, eyewitness statements, and forensic analysis provide a patchwork of clues. Every lead raises more questions than answers, leaving the case unresolved. The public fascination with the disappearance has transformed Ward C into a symbol of the unknown. Books, articles, and online content explore the case in detail, often linking it to broader themes of medical ethics, consciousness, and institutional secrecy. The story has been referenced in academic studies, documentaries, and podcasts examining unsolved disappearances and experimental psychology. Despite decades of inquiry, the central mystery endures. How could a patient vanish entirely from a secure, monitored facility? Each theory, escape, abduction, experimental accident, cover-up, or paranormal occurrence, has supporting details and unexplained gaps. None has been conclusively proven. The site where Ward C once stood has been redeveloped, but reports of unusual phenomena continue. Lights flicker in newly constructed buildings, cold drafts appear unexpectedly, and residents sometimes hear footsteps or whispering in areas once occupied by the hospital. The story of Mr. D remains embedded in the collective memory of the community. The sleeping ward mystery is more than a disappearance. It is a reminder of the limits of observation and understanding. It challenges assumptions about safety, consciousness, and the human mind. The case persists not because of resolution, but because of its enduring enigma, its ability to provoke curiosity, fear, and reflection on what might lie beyond the boundaries of our knowledge. Mr. D may never be found. Ward C may never be understood. Yet the questions remain, echoing through time. Where did he go? What happened inside Ward C? And what is the disappearance of Mr. D? Tell us about the fragile line between science, ethics, and the unknown. The mystery endures. Years have passed since the night Mr. D vanished from St. Peter's Mental Institute. The hospital is gone, replaced by new buildings and new lives, but the questions remain. Every investigator, every former staff member, and every witness still wonders the same thing. What really happened inside Ward C? Some believe it was human error. Others think it was something no one was prepared to understand. But the truth, whatever it is, has never been found. Files remain sealed. Records are missing. The Somni 9 program has never been publicly explained. And the man known only as Mr. D remains missing. The sleeping ward mystery endures not because of answers, but because of silence. It stands as a reminder that even in the most controlled environments, there are forces, human or otherwise, that escape understanding. And sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are not the ones that happen far away, but the ones that take place just beyond the locked door, in the place we believe to be safe.